So, I have to come clean about something. I overheard a conversation while pretending to be asleep. It was early in the morning, you and Dad were eating breakfast, and you were not having a good time. And that's kind of stuck with me. So, could you tell me what that was about?
Well, so George Floyd is the black man who got killed by police who had kept his knee on his neck until he passed out from asphyxiation and died. So, if I remember correctly, there was going to be a march in Tucson to protest the killing of George Floyd by police. And I was so mad because I didn't feel like I would be safe enough to go to that protest, which made me really mad about the fact that I have to be concerned about my safety just simply because of the way I looked. And I think because of the incidents with COVID-19 and how Asian Americans were being targeted, and I felt like I was being targeted, and then the whole thing with George Floyd just was the thing that made me so mad that I just couldn't take the stress anymore. That's probably what made me cry. Just all of that. People of color have always had to think about what they're doing or how they're acting or where they're going, partially because they're targeted, that I don't think people who are not of color get to not have to think about.
What would you want people to understand?
I grew up in the city of Carson, California, and it was probably the most wonderful place to live if you wanted a lot of diversity. It was a neighborhood where no ethnic group was a majority of the population. So there were lots of Hispanics, lots of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, a lot of African Americans, a lot of white Americans as well. It was very diverse, and I've been very lucky to have that background. Living in Los Angeles is pretty easy for Asian Americans. There are a lot of us around in that area, and so I didn't feel like I was discriminated against or not overtly harassed. There are a lot of microaggressions, a lot of things that people say as if it was a joke, for instance, or they would say things under their breath so that nobody could hear it but me. And that was something that I think all Asian Americans go through, and that was something that would sometimes occur. People have asked if I was Chinese, Hawaiian, Vietnamese, Japanese, Mexican, particularly because I lived in a neighborhood that was near a large Latino population. People will talk to me in an accent that may be Japanese, that may be Chinese, just a general Asian accent. Of course, as a child, we would get things like people making their eyes slanty. I've been called slant eyes several times. I've been called pug nose several times. I've also been called Jap. Again, none of these apply to me, really. I've been told by men that they find me exotic, or that I'm just like the girl they dated when they were stationed in the Philippines. I've been told that Filipinos make great wives because they're good cooks and they're compliant. And it happens so often that now I just tend to roll my eyes at it or say, there it is again. One of the biggest things that wasn't personal but felt mean and dangerous to me was when I moved to Oceanside, California, which is in San Diego County. And they've got a big marine base there called Camp Pendleton. So downtown Oceanside had a lot of shops that would cater to the Marines. And in almost every shop there was a hat or a t-shirt that said, "Kill a gook for grandma." That made me decide that I would never go back to downtown Oceanside, because that's pretty terrible to have to see that just when you're going around shopping or window shopping or wanting to meet up with friends. So that to me is what harassment is all about.
Wait, so something like that isn't discrimination?
There's a difference between discrimination and harassment, and I would say that that was considered harassment, and it did make me feel bad, but I don't think anybody, at least anybody official, denied me anything because of my cultural background. Companies were just starting to diversify their workforce, and especially in the news business where I was working, they were trying to get more perspectives amongst their newsroom. And so being a woman and being an Asian American was almost like two good marks that the company was able to get for hiring people of diverse backgrounds. So I don't think I was discriminated at all. I think actually it was an affirmative action situation for me. And it was great because it gave me my break into my career as a news person. Again, I'm basically from the West Coast, so I think a lot of that stuff didn't really happen like it happens in the South or the Midwest and other parts of the country. I think it was very fortunate that I stayed and developed my career on the West Coast as opposed to other places.
So it probably wasn't hard marrying Dad.
Marrying into a white family was not an issue for me. And it certainly wasn't an issue for the guy who turned out to be my husband. It turned out, though, that being non-white was an issue for my in-laws. They were concerned, they expressed concern about the children that we might have. I know that that is code for your child is not going to have the same opportunities because your child is going to be a person of color. My husband, what a great guy, said, "Who cares?" basically, and just kind of left it at that. This is a story that he told me. I was not confronted with it, so I don't know the specifics of how they felt or how much they discussed this with my husband. But it's obvious that once my daughter was born, that was not a problem because they loved her till the day they died.
What is it like to live in Tucson after growing up in a place like SoCal?
I do feel today that Tucson doesn't know Asian Americans very well. There aren't very many of us here, and we're kind of spread out in the community as opposed to having, say, a Chinatown or a Little Manila or something like that. I have to say that I felt most isolated in Tucson when there was the shooting of the women in massage parlors in Atlanta. But I think about it a lot, and I actually do things that I think protect me from a lot of crap that goes on that people of color have to go through. Even today, when I walk by white men who are not wearing masks, I automatically look down because I don't want to make eye contact with them. I'm afraid they might say something to me. And I don't need that kind of hassle. It's very uncomfortable. When we were told that we needed to stay home and not go anywhere, I actually felt relieved because the less I needed to talk to people out in the world out there, the more safe I felt for myself. And so COVID has really been tougher than other situations where Asian Americans were being blamed for terrible things. Early in the pandemic, I was walking into a grocery store and a white woman was coming out, and I swear she saw me and she turned around and walked right back into the grocery store. I don't know what that meant specifically, but I can tell you that that made me feel horrible, that she didn't want to pass me because I looked, to her, maybe I looked Chinese. So it's not just a personal thing, but it is kind of a group thing, kind of a societal thing that we have to think about. And I wish people who haven't been affected can understand that.
So are you saying this is something I can't understand either?
I think so, a little bit.
Is there anything you can share with me that can help me understand what it is like for you as a person of color?
I think it's the same as what I tell everybody who asks me that question is don't turn away. Don't tell me that you don't want to hear these stories. Don't say that I shouldn't be so angry about it. Don't say that other people have it worse. Because I think the understanding comes from the idea that it affects everyone who looks like the person who's been targeted. Because it could easily have been them. It could have easily been me when something bad happens, because that person looks like me. We are often just called Asians, as if we don't belong here, and we never have belonged here, and we never will belong here. I am not Asian. I am Asian American. I am an American. I deserve to be here.